all of our ideas. Absolutely. Such synergy and blessing. It was about time, and how I had this propensity to fill every waking moment with busyness. I mean, how else could I live? High functioning, overproductive, type A personality that I was. And it always worked for me prior to. But I found myself in a season where the challenges were mounting up. I was working 7 days a week without any break. You see, I was a pastor with responsibilities for my church and in the community. I was a consultant balancing the demands of multiple clients. I was a student working on my doctorate, and I was a wife and a mother. So I had responsibilities at home as well. It was a stressful time. And under the weight of all of the stress, my body was rebelling. I was starting to have chest pains. And I found myself one day in the emergency room tethered to an EKG machine. Now that was bad enough. But the real shift came when my child, who was 4 years old at the time, parted the curtains of that ER room and saw me tethered to that EKG machine. And I watched the color drain out of his little face. And I knew something had to change. Now, thankfully, God was gracious and there were no cardiac issues, but life and my leadership had to be different. Because I had a child to raise. It was about time. So in the spaciousness of time, I began to reflect on my leadership and my experiences. And I remembered in my leadership training that there was this theorist by the name of Ronald Heifetz who talked about taking time apart from one's leadership context to create what he called sanctuary. And for Heifetz, sanctuary was that mental or physical place where one could restore their sense of purpose and they could put issues into perspective and regain courage and heart. I remembered, like several of our other speakers have talked about, Heschel, and how Heschel said that Sabbath was sanctuary in time. For you see, when one day is set apart from the others for rest and for worship, time, not material or space, becomes sanctified and the avenue to the divine. Moreover, as our rabbi shared with us, when God hallowed time, taking 1 day in 7 to rest, God, who needs nothing, received a new soul. And then I remembered that ministry pattern of Jesus, my Christ, that ebb and flow in time where he moved from periods of silence and solitude and prayer into ministry to serve, and then back into silence and solitude and prayer. You see, Jesus was sustained in ministry because he made time. Time to connect with God and time to rest. And because it was about time, not 5, but I had 7 R's, 7 ideas of sanctuary. And for me, that was a process to help leaders realize greater effectiveness and increased well-being in their leadership, to encourage them to take time to first retreat, that is, step away from their leadership context, and then release, that is, engage in a period of being, not doing. And then once you've released, you can review. So now we're mindfully considering the tasks of our leadership. And And then once we've reviewed, we can reconnect to the ideals that are core to who we are. And then taking those two poles, we can reflect, weave them together to identify the gaps between our current leadership context and our ideals. And weaving that together, then we can recalibrate. That is, determine the strategies that are going to bring us more in alignment where we should be in our leadership with where we are called. And then, having done all of those things, we can return to our leadership context, grounded and prepared to lead. So it's about Sabbath, but that daily kind of Sabbath taking in the midst of our leadership. And as I engage in and teach this process primarily to clergy, I realize that my time is more abundantly spent and I am fulfilled in my ministry. And you know what? It's about time.